This is another episode of the Sales Practitioner Series. I've got Joseph Fung from Uvaro to talk about the top 3 skills that you aren't practicing. And Joseph knows his stuff. Uvaro is a sales training company. They train thousands of people. And so you got to listen to these guys. They know what they're talking about. Joseph, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me here, Sujan. Always happy to have these conversations.
Awesome. So before we jump in, can you give us a quick rundown of your background?
Sure. I'm a repeat founder. I've been building and selling software for a couple of decades. Uvaro is a boot camp for sales professionals. We help sales and customer service professionals in other industries, hospitality, retail, automotive, get into tech sales. And so we work with them to not just build their skills, but to help them grow beyond. So we have a really fun perspective to see what's working to help people land jobs and then completely nail it as they grow. So always happy to share what we're seeing.
Love it, love it. So, from your training program, we've kind of identified the 3 skills, top salespeople are practicing. Let's just go one by one. What's the first skill?
Absolutely. The first that stands out, again, asked by employers frequently, used most consistently by top performers, is really strong research. Really easy way to put it is that most sales reps don't go deep enough, and really strong research skills are easily overlooked. While you focus on discovery, questions, using Salesforce, you lose track that the more you know about the market and the more you know about the buyer, the more successful you'll be. So really strong research skills.
Love it. So let's say you're not good at that. How would you get better? What's ways to improve?
Absolutely. The big thing is it's less about a technique. It's not like a magic Google search. It's not about a specific website. It's really about a frame of mind. A lot of people come to the problem thinking about personalization. Hey, how quickly can I get the company size, the name, the title, so I can personalize my pitch? But really good research skills go deeper. So the 3 things that you really need to think about there is to understand the job of the person you're selling to. So think about their persona. What are the tasks they need to do? If you're selling to HR, what does an HR professional need to do? Hone up on that, really know what it is. The second is the industry that the company is in. If they make widgets, if they make large machines, look at what's happening in the manufacturing industry. What are the trends? What are the patterns? Again, dig into that, read the news. And the third is their market. Who do they sell to? Let's say you sell machinery and you sell to airports. What's happening in airports in their market. And when you learn those things, then take the mindset of being curious and developing an opinion. Because let's imagine you're selling to an HR professional at an airport. If you know what's happening in their market, you have an opinion on it, and you're being curious about it, you're going to take your deals way further because you suddenly have way more street cred than any other sales rep they chat with.
That's great. I think that also just kind of lends to have a conversation, and you're doing more than just trying to sell them. You can actually intelligently hold a conversation and maybe even know what's right and what's wrong for that person. What's the second thing?
The second big thing, and this probably won't be a surprise when you reflect on that idea of research, is seeing people as people. Like, hey, we're speaking and it's great. I mean, you're the leader in a magnificent software company. We hear great things about it from our students, but at the same time, there's so much more to life than just what you do on the job. And very often sales reps get daunted. They see someone as just the role. If they're calling into a CEO or they're calling into a CFO, they let that set up a barrier. Being really good at seeing someone as a whole person and treating them as such can help your sales conversations move forward way more effectively.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's such a simple concept that I think people just forget, right? So any tips on kind of getting people, I guess, seeing people as people?
I mean, there's all the low-hanging fruit things like, hey, think about the fact that maybe they're in a relationship or they like a sports team. But there's 2 really big things that we help coach people through. The first is to double down and really dig into the story behind your company's discovery questions. If you're a sales rep, your sales enablement team, your sales leaders will give you really good discovery questions. Like, hey, customer, you're thinking about this and it's impacting you this way, right? Well, spend the time to unbox that. Why is that actually likely to be important to them? As a person, why do those things really matter to them? You have a great asset in your discovery questions. So don't just memorize them, take the time to dig into them. The second thing is to practice learning about something you're not interested in. Really good personal example. Growing up, I was never big into sports. As we started working with more sales playbooks, sports analogies, conversations came up all the time. I took the time to learn more about what was going on in the NBA. Not only did I get completely hooked, but it opened up so many conversations that I didn't have before. And so if you can work on that, how do you get interested? How do you learn about something that you're not actually interested in? You can empathize with the person you're speaking to way faster.
Love it, love it. Yeah, and also just practicing what you're not good at and don't have potential interest in is a good way to have these conversations, and it just like opens up a whole lot of doors personally as well. I love it. Yeah, I think I always think of, when you're seeing people as people, going back to like Brian Kramer's book on human to human, right? Like
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what you're selling to or who you're, who the buyer is. Is it an enterprise deal? Is it a SMB? Is it a B2C deal? Are you selling a product through e-commerce, whatever? You're still a human on the other end and a human on your end that, that is a part of that transaction, and seeing that is very important. So with that, what's the third one? What's the third tip?
The third one is really about being authentic. And it's an interesting one because everyone says that as a platitude, but if you can actually hone that skill, taking your personal interests and baking that into the way you sell, it can have such an amplifying effect on your activities. Because if you're doing what you're really passionate about, you're going to see way more success than someone who treats it as just a job. And so figuring out your why, your passion, and then baking that into your work is super critical. And it separates out the good reps from the great reps.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you could fake a conversation and you could do your research, but if you don't care, at some point it's going to show, right? You have to kind of learn to be passionate and kind of, or figure out the angle that works for you. Um, so very great tips. I think I'm going to definitely send this back to my sales team and just make sure we're auditing for this, right? Like, are we doing this? Are we actually, spending time? I think, I can tell you firsthand that we started doing more research on our calls before we do a demo. And I don't have a stat like it drastically improved our conversion rate or whatnot, but it improved that connection rate. And people may not buy immediately, but they came back. They like things happen that were kind of magical, and it wasn't fully measurable. But so thank you for that. I do want to ask you a couple questions around kind of metrics or measurement around this, right?
Hmm.
I just mentioned like I haven't been able to measure it fully, but what are ways sales companies or leaders or managers can kind of measure these types of things?
A lot of these things are difficult. Measuring is someone living their why, living their purpose. That's a really tough thing. There are a few things that you can do to help out. I loved your first example. I did more research before reaching out. My team does more research before reaching out. A really good measure there is that conversion, from your reach out to discovery or from discovery to the next step, consistently across the board. One of the things that we see is groups that do really good research have a higher conversion rate. And so when you fold those together by holding your team accountable to that conversion rate, from a discovery call to your next demo or to that next meeting, that conversion rate will help you assess that. In terms of some of those other more personal items, you can also work on having your team log them. One of the things we see great teams do is measure success, not just in closing the deals, but in terms of meaningful milestones. So wins, kudos, thanks, gratitudes. That can be as easy as a Slack channel where you share those wins and stories, or it could be something like in your sales engagement tool, what you choose to mark as a success. To give you one example, a success measure that one of our grads had. I count her in that great category. She had graduated from our program, landed her role right before she graduated. Within the first 6 weeks, got a promotion. She's working in the financial technology sector, but the part that's interesting is she's an athlete, she's a newcomer to the country, and she's really motivated by helping others. It's really her bread and butter. She ran a fitness company when she was in the Philippines. Now she's selling financial software. And she had a conversation with one of her customers who had bought their software, and that software saved him enough time that he got several hours more with his kids every week. And that's what he was thanking her for. And that win, that brought tears to her eyes. But that was a win. And measuring and tracking those helps her and her team stay accountable to whether or not they're actually living and breathing those. Yeah, that's not a quota carrying thing. The sales ops team isn't responsible for that. But if you can enable your team to think about and track their own metrics, you can definitely help track these.
I love it. And the fact that you mentioned that it's as simple as starting a Slack channel and kind of sharing some wins together, right? I think that's just company wide morale boost and kind of alignment with almost culture. So first of all, thank you so much for joining. That was very, very insightful. I think very practical, easy tips to implement and skills to kind of improve and hone over and over again. Where can folks go to kind of learn more? I mean, I'm almost tempted to just send all of our sales folks through your sales boot camp. Yeah, so where can people go?
Well, if people are interested, they're always happy to visit our website, uvaro.com, uvaro.com. And I'm also happy to share more about what we're seeing in our research or more about our boot camps. I can always be hit up at joseph@uvaro.com. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn at Joseph Fung. So always happy to chat.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Hey, Sujan, it's my pleasure. This was a real joy.